The sky above the port was the colour of a television tuned to a dead channel. I read these words, the opening sentence from William Gibson's 1984 novel Neuromancer, as I'm stood on the superhighway connecting London City Island and the Lower Lee Crossing. Straight over the wharf is the O2 Arena, and if I crane my neck north, I can see the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, somewhere beyond the East End plexus and mesh. In the same year Neuromancer was published, GEC Molum signed the contract to build the initial Docklands Light Railway system. The automated system was built as part of the East End's regeneration project. Billboard slogans from the time claimed the Docklands would soon feel like Venice and work like New York. Both Neuromancer and the DLR are more than 30 years old now. In that time, we've assimilated into the cyberspatial reality Gibson envisioned, able to jack in and out of any informational matrix as quick as we can think. However, where Gibson's console cowboys game this phenomenon to traverse the sprawl's anarcho-capitalist landscape to their own fortune, our relationship to the city and its financialised superstructures runs on a much duller asymmetry.
We are here. In the inner city.
One might consider the use of contactless debit and credit cards on TfL networks, in which a consumer appendage passes through a superstructure of control. Whilst initially appearing to be designed for the sake of convenience, reducing the number of operational cards necessary to go between work and home and incentivising its usage through a weekly price cap. The interoperability between bank account and travel card means that data on both ends can be stored and used in surveillance. For Gilles Deleuze, in his postscript on the societies of control, this makes us no longer individuals, but dividuals, undulatory, in orbit, in a continuous network. With our movement reduced to data, both the bank and travel network gain sovereignty over the flows of information within this exchange. Or we might think of the free Wi-Fi available across the TfL network, in which our data is used to streamline a market for advertising within the stations. Even if you don't connect to the Wi-Fi, your smartphone's presence is registered in the station. Borders become immaterial and ubiquitous. We've become nomads, restlessly wandering about, even if our wanderings consist of scrolling through constantly refreshing social media feeds. These small conveniences offered up in exchange for data are minimal. The train stations have become what writer and artist James Bridle called code spaces. A code space is when technologies interweaving with a space become so essential that they cease to function without it. Bridle suggests that these opaque computational processes spread themselves across all platforms within our lives, and in this way, culture itself has become a code space. Predictive algorithms that run these spaces structure themselves so that things will not radically change or diverge from previous experiences in order to maintain regularity and an appearance of order. Spotify's London Mood playlist puts Burial's Archangel next to Elton John's Tiny Dancer and shoves Estelle and Kanye West's American Boy between impotent indie fodder and Grimes' mainstream crossover hits. In effect, it doesn't matter if playlists like this on massive streaming platforms are made by humans or machine learning algorithms. Some artists will be pushed up the algorithm for ad bucks. Some artists will adapt the music they make to prioritise their tunes in the genius queue of immediate chorus hit after hit. And some artists will steep their work in esotericism, desperate to have their radical sonic frequencies picked out and prized from a homogeneous empty sea. All artists on streaming platforms are renting listeners, and listeners are renting the music they choose to listen to. Taking away this level of ownership from our everyday consumption of music removes agency from the artists, as they're absorbed into the terms of consumption set out by the streaming platform. Of course, the more music that is streamed, the more sophisticated the platform's algorithms can become, and the less control music producers have over their position in the network. But that's all it is, a network, the efficacy of which is decided by how much it's used. The only service streaming platforms offer then is the extraction of the flows within that network, but somehow the impact they have on the shape of music as a cultural object at large stretches far wider. Descending into the deep level platforms, completed in 1999, a tube carriage pulls into Westminster Station. Whether they know it or not, the customers on board this Jubilee Line service are communicating with the machinic rhythm of the underground. The notional void takes detailed notes of all our friends' journeys. Going east with each static wall we stop at, life expectancy drops off by a year. I keep my headphones on. I've had a busy day and I'm very tired by now. At the same time, it's very hard to imagine a radically different way of navigating the city. When the French poet Paul Verlaine moved to London in 1872, the Metropolitan Railway was expanding across the city. The Jubilee Line, heading eastbound towards Stratford, 8 a.m, is parked in the darkest point of the tunnel between Canada Water and Canary Wharf. The automated voice rises over the swarm, crackling like 1,000 bedbugs fucking and killing through the signal failure. Currently held at a red light, the crypt exists from before the origin of time, but it begins with year zero.
Hey, child.
If Fille was to look up to the sky in 1872, that's all he would have seen. It wasn't until the Shard contravened the Protected Views Law at the beginning of this millennium that London began to indulge in Manhattan's vertical inclinations. This project to Americanise East London coalesced with a perennial shift in nightlife. In 1998, as the Jubilee Line extension through Canary Wharf to Stratford was built, Some Treat released their UK garage classic, Lost in Vegas.
I will always be there for you.
Garage detangled the collectivity of jungle and rave. The acid flourishes and abstracted cartoon figures on the posters were to be replaced with faux slick champagne flutes and silhouetted female figures. Mandatory entrepreneurialism had infiltrated youth culture, conjoining flows without the mediation of codes. The stylist descends deep into the grooves, and then the bass arrests you. Songs from the rave generation tended to detour pop samples, longing for lost lovers into longing for a collective consciousness. You look like you're in another world. I'll meet you there. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's starting to get light. I'm right where I want to be, losing track of time. Meanwhile, Garage assimilated catchy hooks for club currency. The promise of playing top 40 tracks in the club accelerated bar sales for a generation steeped in the capitalist realism of a new Labour government who cemented the idea that nightlife should be measured in its economic, not its cultural worth. 20 years on, the high point of a night in a London bar for many is the nostalgic drop of a Garage classic. Esteemed Labour/Change UK/Lib Dem politician Chuka Amuna used to be a UK garage DJ. He pronounces the genre as if it were to rhyme with Nigel Farage's name. Of course, it must be taken into account that before the garage scene could be assimilated fully, it had to be whitewashed first. Young black MCs looking for careers beyond the nightclub claimed an angular mutation of garage, grime, as their own sound. In 2005, the London Metropolitan Police introduced Form 696, a risk assessment form that was required to be filled out by promoters a fortnight before their events. As part of this form, promoters had to declare the style of music that would be played on the night, and all too often, grime nights were barred in this process. Venues and nights that offered crucial agency to these marginalised London groups were taken away. By the time the form was finally scrapped for good at the end of 2017, a different sound was fizzing through London. A new generation of young MCs had imported a sound that originated in the south side of Chicago to capture the way that their London sounded. Unlike the glitchy dada of grime, drill prefers the martial roll of deep kick drums atop hazy halftime synthetic textures. The Harlem Spartans crew from Kennington brought London into the mix with thick and punishing dubstep bass lines. This version of drill would become most prominently associated with New York's late great Pop Smoke. Behind the decks of Pop Smoke's most iconic songs is 808 Mellow, a producer from Ilford in East London that the drill rapper found looking for beats on YouTube.
And when it's showtime, they be taking money out their purses. It's 100 racks when I touch a stage, how could I ever get nervous?
Baby, welcome to the party. I'm off the money that's in the lean, that's why I'm over retarded. Baby, welcome to the party. I hit the boy up and then I go skate in a Rari. Baby, welcome to the party. Bitch, I'm a thot, get me lit. Gun on my head, 1.5, 10 in the clip. Baby.
The austere urgency of UK drill is not interested in what Mark Fisher called depressive hedonia, an idea best described sonically by the hip-hop sound present in the white adjacent nightclubs of Mayfair and Piccadilly. In artists like Drake or Post Malone, we hear a melancholy that's not rooted in the ability to get pleasure, but an inability to do anything besides pursue pleasure. Recalling Deleuze's essay on control societies, Fisher suggests that we as subjects are trapped between the dispersed network of control structures and a social imperative to be consumers of services. An almost essential feature of UK drill music videos is the establishing shot of a drone flying over the musician's estate. The artist's gaze becomes sovereign, absolute. Drill's machinic impulse is to search for an exit from a matrix that insists it stays at the fringes of its gridwork. In 2019, UK police forced YouTube to delete 130 drill music videos and say they're monitoring 2,000 more. Some rappers have even been banned from performing without police permission. The temptation for drill is to allow itself to be absorbed into the formalised nostalgia of the pop machine, in the same way that Skepta achieved mainstream acclaim for grime with the wistful That's Not Me, as if his genre hadn't been fighting for recognition from an industry peddling an eternal rockist vacuum throughout his entire career. Headie 1's recent single, Ain't It Different, sees him spit atop a beat made up of noughties pop samples and the classic garage vocal from Bump and Grind, relegating his iconic flow and drilly hi-hat patterns to the background. The other artists featured in the song include AJ Tracey, who made his name with the garage throwback single, Ladbroke Grove, and Stormzy, whose most recent album includes a cover of the Tracy Beaker theme song. Ivorian Doll, on the other hand, subverts drill's hypermasculine engine into a declaration of feminine emancipation.
I sip my liquor while your nigga eats me out. Free course dinner. Body bag these bitches. I don't chit chat with them snitches. I body bag these bitches. Lead them all to their ditches. Ditch, shovel, clip run up, that's trouble. Big bang, that's a puddle.
The Northern Line is being extended to new stations Nine Elms and Battersea, where the US Embassy is the epicenter at the next site of Americanization. The Northern Quarter of Wandsworth becoming the Lexington Plaza, the old power station becoming new age office spaces. Frank Gehry designed Prospect Place, and its surrounding developments have been sold on the market before even being built, but how many will be lived in? Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick came under fire after quietly approving a deal with billionaire developer and Conservative Party donor Richard Desmond that meant his 5 new blocks in the West Ferry Printworks area along the curve of the Isle of Dogs would only need to be made up of 21% affordable homes instead of the original 35% minimum target, saving the developer more than £100 million in the process. The agreement came out the day before a community infrastructure levy came into place, a tax that would have required Mr. Desmond to pay £40 million to Tower Hamlets Council, the city's poorest borough. A text to the housing minister from Desmond said, "We appreciate the speed, as we don't want to give the Marxists loads of dough for nothing." The other part of the deal was that the printworks wouldn't need to be part of the Canary Wharf step down, which preserves the financial skyscrapers as the only tall buildings in the area. The Mill Harbour area, north of the development site, is the most densely populated part of London, with 9 out of 10 of the tallest residential buildings in the city. At the same time, Jenrick has introduced new laws extending permitted development rights, minimising planning permission required for housing from converted shops, warehouses and offices. With no specific rules and adequate lighting, shoebox studio apartments could be entirely lit by a small window borrowing all its light from an internal atrium, leaving nowhere else to look towards but the consensual hallucinations of the information superhighway. When the Situationists imagined a new model for Paris, they understood that you can't take 3 steps without encountering ghosts bearing all the prestige of their legends. When we look at all these sites of regeneration, their fear of frigid architecture leading to boring leisure has come true. Massaging the history of these zones into thin air serves only to reify their present landscapes. Radical new futures are raised before they can even form themselves. Suffocated by battery proximity, while simultaneously desiring to worm our way to the heart of the crowd. Alone together, the hacienda must be built, becoming imperceptible in order to be seen. The Long Good Friday is a film made in 1979 about East London businessman Harold Shand. The Stepney geezer wants to turn London's deflated docklands into a hub of global commerce, authenticated by hosting the 1988 Olympic Games. Shand is convinced he will be able to achieve this by going into business with New York mafiosos. His plans seem to be going so well. On his beautiful yacht, he puffs out his barrel chest and tells his friends and family,
"I'm not a politician. I'm a businessman with a sense of history, and I'm also a Londoner. And today is a day of great historical significance for London. Our country's not an island anymore. We're a leading European state. And I believe that this is the decade in which London will become Europe's capital. Having cleared away the outdated, we've got mile after mile and acre after acre of land for our future prosperity. No other city in the world has got right in its centre such an opportunity for profitable progress.
Written shortly before Thatcher would have taken the stage to call Mr. Shand a model Brit, The Long Good Friday encapsulates all of the UK's defining shifts under neoliberalism. Unfortunately for Harold Shand, a series of mistakes from his underlings leads him to war with the IRA, one he inevitably loses. Initially, the film was deemed too risky for the cinema. A flick in which capitalism is defeated by terrorists could only cause trouble, right? 40 years on, and 10 years after the financial crisis Canary Wharf was built to produce, the likes of The Spectator see The Long Good Friday as the first truly Thatcherite film. I'm reminded of the HSBC ad campaign that went something along the lines of, "We are not an island. We are an American movie watching, tikka masala eating, wonderful little lump of land in the middle of the sea. We're part of something bigger." The IRA may have taken down Harold Shand, but in his wake lay an entire generation of assiduous individuals looking to continue his work regenerating the Docklands in the same way, and a government agenda that was very happy to accelerate the process. As the place of the city becomes more and more of a traffic nexus and gateway to virtuality, fueling ecological collapse, it's vital that we consolidate the fact that even though we will never understand the black box new technologies that control so much around us, they will always work within the ideological framework of the people that build them. That's an ideological framework that continues to hijack new technologies into condensing wealth by any means necessary. We will never be defined by global citizen PR campaigns that romanticize universal data commodification as a form of liberal humanitarianism. An overload of prediction and categorization serves only to sterilize and domesticate the crucial subcultural blossoms that emerge from the unique lives lived within a city. The sky above the port was the color of a television tuned to a dead channel. In Neuromancer, the future is merely an atemporal digital now. But that doesn't sound very futuristic.